Imagine two people standing in the rain. The first person is holding a massive bucket. The rain pours in, but the bucket has 100 holes in the bottom. And no matter how hard it rains, no matter how much water pours in, the bucket stays empty. He is exhausted. He is stressed. And at the end of the storm, he has nothing. The second person is holding a small cup. Just a cup. But the cup has no holes. The rain is lighter for him. He earns less. But he catches every drop. And once the cup is full, he pours it into a barrel. Then another barrel. At the end of the storm, the man with the massive bucket is looking for water. The man with the small cup is wealthy. This is the financial reality most of us are living without realizing it. We are obsessed with income. We think the answer is to earn more. But earning more when your habits are broken is just pouring water into a leaking bucket faster. You do not get richer, you just speed up the waste. In Japan, they understood this a long time ago. In 1904, Japan's first female journalist, a woman named Hani Motoko, created a system called Kakebo. The translation is simple: household financial ledger. It is not an app. It is not a spreadsheet. It is a notebook and a pen. And it is the reason Japanese households have historically saved between 20 and 35% of a modest income, not because they earn more, but because they lose less. Today, I want to walk you through the complete Kakebo system, not as a history lesson. As something you can start this week, the first thing to understand is why most of us are so bad with money without realizing it. And the answer is that money has become invisible. You tap your card, you click buy now, you use your phone to pay for something before you have even fully processed that you're buying it. You never see the money leave. You never feel it go. This is not an accident. Companies have spent billions of dollars removing the friction from the act of spending. Every design decision in modern payment systems, every one-click purchase, every auto-renewal, every saved card, all of it exists to reduce the moment between wanting something and paying for it to as close to zero as possible. There is a well-documented psychological phenomenon called the pain of paying. When you hand someone cash, your brain registers a genuine sense of loss. It processes the transaction as something real leaving you. When you tap a card, that pain is almost entirely absent. The transaction feels like nothing. And so you spend without thinking every day in small amounts that feel like nothing individually and add up to something significant over a month. Kakebo is the act of reintroducing friction on purpose. It asks you to write down every expense, by hand, in a physical book. And when you have to physically write down the words, coffee, $6, your brain processes that transaction differently than when it disappears silently into a digital statement. You pause. You think. You feel even slightly the weight of the choice. The invisible becomes visible. Invisible money is money you manage very differently than money you never see. The Kakebo system is built around 4 questions you ask yourself at the beginning of every single month. Not once a year during a financial review. Not when things get tight. Every month. You sit down with your notebook and you write, how much money do I have available this month? How much would I like to save? How much do I need to spend on essentials? And how can I do better than last month? Most people approach their finances in the opposite order. They spend through the month, and then they save whatever happens to be left at the end, which is usually very little or nothing at all. Kakebo reverses the equation. Income minus your savings goal equals your spending money. You remove the savings first, before you spend anything. If you earn $3,000 and you want to save $500, you move the $500 immediately. What remains is what you have to live on. This creates what you might call intentional scarcity. When you have less available, you make different decisions. You stop buying the nice to have before you have covered the must have. You start thinking about whether a purchase is actually necessary or whether it just felt necessary in the moment you saw it. The Kakebo practitioner does not check their bank balance to decide if they can afford something. They check their budget. The bank balance is a lie because it includes rent money, bill money, and savings all mixed together. The budget is the truth. Once you have set your monthly intention, every expense you make goes into one of 4 categories. The first category is survival: rent, food, utilities, transport, medicine, the non-negotiables. You cannot cut these to zero, but you can be honest about them and look for places to optimize. The second category is optional: dining out, shopping, subscriptions, entertainment. This is where most of the leaking happens. This is where the battle is won or lost. The third category is culture: books, courses, museums, films, things that grow your understanding of the world. Kakebo does not treat this as waste. Spending money to develop yourself is an investment, not an indulgence, but it still gets tracked because everything gets tracked. The fourth category is unexpected: the repair bill you didn't see coming, the gift you forgot to plan for, the thing that life added to the month that wasn't in your budget. Every evening, and this is the part most people skip and the reason most budgets fail, you spend 3 minutes with your notebook. You take any receipts from the day. You write each expense into its category, by hand, 3 minutes. That is the daily practice. And it matters more than the monthly review, because it keeps you in contact with your decisions while the memory is still fresh. If you spent $40 last night on dinner you didn't plan for, you write it down this morning. You feel the mild discomfort of seeing it on paper. That discomfort is the system working. Most people look at their finances once a month, at the end of the month when all the damage has already been done. That is an autopsy. Kakebo is a daily check-in while the patient is still alive. For the optional category, the fun spending, the discretionary money, there's a complementary method that makes the system even more concrete. At the beginning of the month, withdraw your optional budget in cash. Put it in an envelope. When you go out, take the cash from the envelope. When the envelope is empty, the optional spending for the month is finished. There is no overdraft. There is no putting the rest on a card. The physical limit is absolute. If you spend everything in the first 10 days, you spend the remaining 20 days without. That is uncomfortable. And the discomfort teaches you, faster than any advice could, to pace yourself. In a world where digital spending can always be adjusted, stretched, covered, a physical envelope cannot. An empty envelope is simply empty. The third element of Kakebo that most budgeting systems miss is the waiting period. In the Kakebo notebook, there's a section called the wish list. When you see something you want, something that is not a survival need, something in the optional category or beyond, you do not buy it immediately. You write it down. You give it 30 days. After 30 days, you look at the list and ask yourself honestly, do I still want this, or was I just bored or tired or looking for something to make me feel better in that moment? Most of the time, after 30 days, the answer is that you barely remember why you wanted it. The desire has passed, and you have kept the money without having to fight yourself to keep it, because you simply waited until the fight was no longer necessary. This is how Kakebo handles impulse buying, not through willpower in the moment, which is very hard to sustain, but through delay, which is much easier. If you still want the thing just as strongly after 30 days, you buy it with full intention. That is a real purchase, made thoughtfully, not a reaction to a moment. There is a Japanese concept called monozukuri, a deep respect for materials and for craftsmanship, that sits underneath the Kakebo philosophy. It is related to the idea of motenai, which we have talked about before on this channel, the sense of regret at waste, the feeling that something of value is being lost when things are discarded unnecessarily. When you practice Kakebo, something shifts in how you relate to what you already own. Before you buy new shoes, you clean and polish the ones you have. Before you buy a new phone, you clear the storage, fix the small things that were bothering you, and actually look at whether the problem is the phone or just the accumulation of clutter on it. By caring for what you have, you extend its life, and you reduce, almost automatically, the desire for something newer. The consumer economy depends entirely on dissatisfaction. It needs you to feel that what you have is not quite enough, not quite right, slightly out of date. Kakebo, through the daily practice of writing down what things actually cost, tends to produce the opposite feeling. You start to see your spending clearly, and when you see it clearly, you often find that a lot of what you were buying was not adding much to your life, and what you were not buying was not missing from it. At the end of every month, the Kakebo system asks you to do what the Japanese call hansei, reflection. You open your notebook, you look at what you actually spent versus what you intended to spend. You ask yourself the hard questions. Where did I spend more than I planned? What was happening in my life when that spending increased? Was I stressed? Was I tired? Was I celebrating something? Was I trying to feel better about something else? This is not about guilt or self-criticism. It is about data. You're trying to understand your own patterns well enough to change them. Maybe you discover that you spend significantly more in the weeks when work is difficult. That is useful information. Next month, when work gets difficult, you can prepare a free alternative. A walk, a call with a friend, something that addresses the actual feeling without the spending. Over months, this reflection creates a feedback loop. You get more accurate. You get more honest with yourself. The gap between what you plan to spend and what you actually spend gets smaller. And eventually, the savings rate you once thought was ambitious starts to feel normal. Here is the thing that I want to leave you with, because I think it is the most important idea in this entire system. Wealth is not a number. It is a ratio. There is a person who earns $200,000 a year and spends $200,000 a year. At the end of the year, they have nothing. If their income stopped tomorrow, they would be in serious trouble within 30 days. There's a person who earns $50,000 a year and spends $30,000. At the end of the year, they have $20,000. Each year, that person is buying a little more freedom, a little more time that belongs to them, a little more distance between themselves and the situation where they have no choice. The second person is wealthier than the first, not because they earn more, they earn far less, but because the gap between what comes in and what goes out is working in their favor. Kakebo is a system for widening that gap, not by depriving yourself, by seeing clearly. by removing the invisibility that modern spending is designed to maintain, by making every choice deliberate instead of automatic. Here is the simplest version of a Kakebo practice you can start this week. Get a notebook, any notebook. At the beginning of the week, write down what you have available and what you intend to save. Every evening this week, write down every single thing you spent money on. At the end of the week, look at the list. Circle everything in the optional category. Add it up. You will very likely be surprised by the number, not because you are reckless, because the system has been designed to make that number invisible. Kakebo makes it visible, and once you can see it, you can change it. That is the whole system: a notebook, a pen, and the willingness to look.